In this video, we'll be exploring how to successfully set up a real-time sync which will connect Salesforce data into Cinchy. I have some contacts which originate in Salesforce that I'd like to bring into Cinchy. They belong to the company United Oil and Gas Corporation. I'd like all existing and any new contacts in the future belonging to this company to be automatically brought into Cinchy and updated automatically as well if a change is made to their record in Salesforce. I want this data to be accurate in Cinchy, so Carson, their account director, can manage the contacts within the Cinchy environment. As you can see, the data resides in the contact object in Salesforce. These are the columns we'd like to sync into Cinchy: the name of the contact, the name of the company, the title or position of the contact at the company, their phone number and email address, the company ID, and the contact Salesforce ID. Now I'd like to point out that the account name column is linked from another object in Salesforce: account. Since this column is linked, we will need to set up two real-time syncs, one which pulls the account name and ID and populates it into the companies table in Cinchy, and another one which syncs in the contact information. In the second real-time sync configuration, we are able to pull the account name based on a link between the account IDs that exist both in the contact and account objects. Since we are syncing in account name and ID regardless, we might as well sync in the billing address, city, state or province, and zipper postal code. Let's have a look at both tables in Cinchy. First, we will sync in the account data we just had a look at. Here are the corresponding columns in the Cinchy companies table: name, street address, city, province or state, postal or zip code, and here we will populate the Salesforce ID. Then we can sync in our contact information. Here we have the corresponding columns for the contact object in Salesforce: the company ID and contact ID, the account name and the contact's name, their email and phone number, and lastly, the title of their position at the company. I've set up the real-time syncs, so let's walk through the steps I've taken to get there. Let's begin by taking a look at our configuration for the account sync using the connector UI. The connector UI makes it easier to set up the configuration needed for a real-time sync. As you can see, I have named the XML Salesforce to Cinchy Accounts Real-Time Sync, and the version is 1.0.0. This configuration is entirely up to the builder. Feel free to use any name and version convention that you or your company prefers. Here we've selected a Salesforce push topic as the source. As mentioned before, the Salesforce object is account, and here's the login URL to Salesforce. The client ID is the unencrypted client ID for Salesforce, and the client secret is the unencrypted client secret for Salesforce. These are our Salesforce credentials, unencrypted as well. The UI will encrypt these for us. Now, these three fields here are for the listener configuration. I've set the auto offset reset to earliest. I could have also selected latest or none. Let's take a look at the topic. This here is the push topic ID. When we first input the topic into the UI, we did not have this value as the push topic ID did not exist. The first time the real-time sync ran, this value was automatically generated and populated for us. Now we set up a query to select the columns we want from the account object in Salesforce. I did not add a filter within the query to limit the accounts I'm syncing into Cinchy, as I want all companies which exist in Salesforce to exist in Cinchy as well. Our API version is 47.0. We've set all notification options to true and notify for fields to reference. And we have set the topic name to topic account 1, with the type being topic. The connection attributes are here. Let's take a look. This here is defining the URL to be directed to when the sync runs. It is a Salesforce login page. Again, we have our API version as 47.0. Our grants type is password. And lastly, we have the client ID, client secret, username, and password all already encrypted this time. Now, the schema outlines the columns we are interested in from the account object in Salesforce. Moving on to the destination, we have the companies table in Cinchy. We've also mapped out the Salesforce columns to the corresponding columns in the Cinchy table. The sync key is the Salesforce ID because it is always unique and it's best practice. Now here we have set new record behavior to insert, meaning if a new record is created in Salesforce, it will automatically insert into Cinchy as well. However, if a company is removed from the Salesforce object, this will be ignored in Cinchy, as we'd like to keep a record of all existing and past companies and customers. Now, if the company already exists in Cinchy and a change is made to the record in Salesforce, we have also set this to trigger an update to the record in Cinchy. And that completed the configuration. Now we can test to see if our real-time sync setup has been successful, since we already have both the Cinchy CLI and the Cinchy event listener running successfully. Since a real-time sync will only be triggered when there's been a change in Salesforce, I'm going to temporarily change a field in the United Oil and Gas Corporation record. I'll change the billing street to test to see if the record will be inserted into Cinchy. Let's have a look. Perfect, here's United Oil and Gas Corporation. Our sync has been successful. I'm going to set the company as active. Now let's change the street address back in Salesforce and see if our changed record behavior will force an update in Cinchy. Perfect, we now see the correct address in Cinchy as well. Now that we know our first real-time sync is running successfully, let's take a look at the data sync configuration for the company contacts. As you can see, similarly to the account sync, I've named the XML Salesforce's Cinchy Contacts Real-Time Sync, and the version is 1.0.0. The source is a Salesforce push topic again, and the URL, client ID, client secret, username, and password are all the same as the previous data sync. The object, of course, is different, it's contact. I've set the auto offset reset to earliest again as well, and now let's take a look at the topic. Here we've set up a query to select the columns we want from the contact object in Salesforce. I also added a filter here to ensure we are only updating or altering the records belonging to United Oil and Gas Corporation. Their company ID is 432. The connection attributes are the same as the previous sync, and similarly, the schema will also simply outline the columns we are interested in from the contact object in Salesforce. Now the destination is the contacts table in Cinchy, of course, and we've mapped out the Salesforce columns to the corresponding columns in the Cinchy table. The main difference from the previous configuration is when we map the account name column, we also need to define the link column. You'll remember we are using the account ID as the link column, and that is what is defined here. The sync key is the Salesforce ID again because it is always unique and it is best practice. The new record, changed record, and dropped record behavior are all the same. And that completed the configuration. Now we can test to see if our second real-time sync setup has been successful. I'm going to temporarily change Lauren, Stella, and AV's phone number to test to see if this will be reflected in Cinchy. I would also like to see if our filter has been applied. Let's try changing this phone number to test as well. Let's have a look. Perfect! Since Stella, Lauren, and AV's contacts did not exist in Cinchy beforehand, 3 rows have been inserted for their records. As you can see, their records are the only ones that have been inserted, since they belong to United Oil and Gas Corporation and the other contact did not. Therefore, our filter has worked. Now, whenever there's a change to any records belonging to United Oil and Gas Corporation, it will be reflected in Cinchy. Now let's approve these change requests and see if the real-time sync will update existing records. Perfect! The real-time sync is also able to update existing records based on changes that occur in Salesforce.